I lived in that apartment for 3 months. And in the last week I was there, something started pacing above me. The landlord swore the unit upstairs was empty. My neighbor moved out overnight. And one night, at 3 in the morning, the pacing came inside my apartment. I moved into my last apartment in late spring, and the first thing I remember thinking was how absurdly quiet the building was. No kids, no traffic noise, no barking dogs. Even inside the hallways, the footsteps seemed soft and slow, like everyone was trying not to disturb something. It wasn't just quiet in a normal way. It was the kind of quiet that made the air feel thicker, the kind that made you notice the sound of your own breathing. When I carried my boxes up the stairs, I kept pausing on the landings, almost expecting to hear someone else moving around, but there was never anything. Just the low hum of the fluorescent light over the mailboxes, and the faint smell of old carpet. The landlord told me the unit above was vacant. So for the first month, I didn't hear a single noise from upstairs. Not even plumbing, not even pipes. The silence was the kind that makes you feel self-conscious about closing drawers. If I dropped a fork in the kitchen, it sounded too loud. If I turned over in bed, the sheets seemed to rustle like paper. I even started lowering the volume on the TV. Not because anyone complained, but because it felt wrong to break that silence. But sometime around mid-June, I started hearing pacing above me. Slow, rhythmic, like someone who had nowhere else to be. The first night, it lasted about an hour. The second night, it went on until almost 3 in the morning. The footsteps were always barefoot, no hard heel, just a soft slap with each step. At first, I figured someone must have moved in without me noticing. It wasn't my business, but the weird part was, I never heard furniture being moved, never heard boxes, never heard a door slam. Just the pacing. Same pattern. Same speed. On the 4th night, I mentioned it to my landlord. "Oh no," he said casually. "Nobody's moved in upstairs. That unit is still empty." I laughed, thinking he was joking. He wasn't. "Well," I said, "someone's definitely up there." He narrowed his eyes a little and said, "I'll check it out after work," and that was it. But when I got home later that day, there was no sign anyone had gone inside. The door upstairs still had the same faint scratch near the handle I'd noticed on move-in day. The dust on the frame looked undisturbed. The pacing started again at midnight. This time I timed it. 6 steps. Pause. 6 steps. Pause. Over and over for nearly 2 hours. I remember staring at the ceiling and counting along, just to make sure I wasn't imagining the rhythm. By the end of the week, I stopped mentioning it. Telling people about it only made me sound dramatic. And honestly, I was half convinced I was being overly sensitive to normal apartment noise. Then one night around 2:30 a.m., the pacing stopped abruptly, and I heard something I hadn't heard before. A dragging sound. Slow, heavy, like someone pulling a duffel bag across the floor. I sat up in bed, heart pounding, and actually held my breath to hear better. It went on for maybe 10 seconds. Then everything went silent. The silence was so total, the apartment felt pressurized. I lay awake until morning. The next day, just to reassure myself, I knocked on the door upstairs. 3 knocks, evenly spaced. No sound from inside. But as I turned away, I felt this uncomfortable sensation that someone was very close to the door. Like I could sense their presence behind it. Not moving, not breathing, just standing there. I pushed that thought away and went downstairs. That night, the pacing changed. Instead of the 6-step pattern, it was shorter, more frantic. Quick steps, then a rapid stop. Quick steps again, sometimes right above my bedroom. Sometimes over the living room, like whatever was up there was listening for where I was. I started changing rooms more often. If I heard the steps above the couch, I'd go into the kitchen. If they followed, I'd go back to the bedroom. After a few nights of that, I realized I was adjusting my behavior around something that wasn't even supposed to exist. Then came the tapping, light at first, like someone drumming their fingers through the floorboards. First at my ceiling, then toward the front of the unit. Always one tap at a time. Never a rhythm. Sometimes right above the light fixture. Other times near the hallway, like someone leaning down, listening. It lasted all week. I tried the landlord again. But the second I brought it up, he shut it down. "Nobody is renting that unit," he said sharply. And if someone broke in, I'd know. He wasn't angry. Just uncomfortable, like he'd been waiting for this topic to come up and didn't want to hear it out loud. By July, I started sleeping with a fan on. It helped with the noise. but not with the sensation that I was being followed room to room from above. Every morning at exactly 7:15, I'd hear a single thump from above the kitchen. Not a step, not a door. Just one heavy impact, like someone dropping something deliberately. I even set an alarm one morning to check, at exactly 7:15. The thump came again, same spot, same weight. One morning after the thump, I heard a whisper, faint, through the ceiling. I couldn't make out the words. It sounded like someone rehearsing something quietly. Not chanting, not talking, just breathy syllables with no tone. I froze mid-stride, staring up at the plaster while every hair on my arms lifted. I didn't call out. I just stood there until it stopped. That same week, a storm knocked out the power in the living room. The lights went off around 10 p.m. The hallways went completely dark. No emergency lighting, no exit signs. I was making tea when it happened, so when everything went black, I grabbed my phone flashlight. That's when I heard it. Footsteps, a single set, walking down the hallway outside my door. Slow, steady, deliberate. No voice, no keys, just bare feet against the tile. They stopped directly in front of my door. I didn't move, didn't speak, didn't breathe. After maybe 20 or 30 seconds, the footsteps continued toward the stairwell. I heard them climb level by level, until they were directly above, and then, faintly, the pacing started again. 2 days later, I caught my neighbor, the only other person on my floor, throwing bags into his car at 8 a.m. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. You leaving? I asked. He hesitated for a long time. Finally, he said, yeah, I'm not staying here another night. He just stared at the upper landing. Before he got into his car, he said, if it starts pacing before midnight, don't go to sleep. Then he drove off. That night I sat up waiting. Midnight passed. 1 a.m. passed. Nothing. No footsteps. No tapping. The quiet felt different. Not peaceful. Just expectant. Like the building was holding its breath. I must have dozed off around 3 in the morning, because I woke up to a sound that didn't belong in my apartment. The pacing was inside my unit. Not loud. Not frantic. Just slow, exploratory steps somewhere between the living room and the hall. And what struck me wasn't that someone was in my apartment. It was that the steps sounded identical to the ones from upstairs. Same barefoot slap, same measured pauses. I reached for my phone, but before I could unlock it, the steps stopped. The silence that followed felt alive. Then, as clearly as if someone were leaning over the bed, I heard breathing. Soft, patient, almost curious. I didn't look. I just whispered, "Who's there?" The breathing stopped instantly. Nothing moved. No footsteps leaving. No door opening. When I turned on the light, the apartment was empty. Windows locked. No signs of forced entry. The pacing never returned upstairs after that. Not once. And from that night forward, the unit above felt truly empty, the way it had when I first moved in. I moved out a month later. On my last day, I asked the landlord how long the upstairs unit had been vacant. Almost a year, he said. Tenant left suddenly, wouldn't even finish the lease. Had the movers get his stuff while he stayed in his car outside. Did he say why? I asked. The landlord hesitated, then shrugged. Said he kept hearing someone in the apartment with him. I didn't ask anything else. I didn't want answers. 3 weeks later, I checked the listing out of curiosity. Still vacant, still described as quiet building. The shadows are watching. Will you return for more? Like and subscribe if you want to hear the voices that whisper in the dark.